We are Group 4.9, and this is our final report video journal for ME 435. In the first lab focused on the Dobot, we learned the primary means of controlling the machine. We were first taught simply how to turn the Dobot on and how to link it to a computer. Next, we learned how to create a basic flow instructing the Dobot to move in various ways. We focused on the three primary motion styles, being MOVJ, MOVL, and jump. These all instruct the Dobot to end at the same location, but the style of movement differs from one to another. Once we were familiar with simple motion commands, focus was shifted to the various end effectors that the Dobot can use. We learned how to use both a vacuum-powered suctioning device as well as a mechanical claw. In following Dobot labs, we primarily used the suctioning device. The first lab also covered some of the math behind jointed robots. Without going into too much depth, we made a rigid body model in MATLAB that emulated the provided Dobot. While this model was not used for any of the following Dobot labs, it was helpful in forming a foundational understanding of the machine's dynamics.
During Lab 2, our group was able to learn about the conveyor belt while using the IR switch, image processing with feature matching, calibration, and color extraction. In order to control the conveyor belt, an IR switch was used. In the Dobot Vision Studio software, an input and output function was created, which then was connected to a branch, acting like a switch statement in MATLAB. The branch would then lead to a corresponding command from an input of 1 or 0 from the IR. One command would enable the belt, while the other command would stop the belt. When the conveyor stops, we program the Dobot to go to the correct X, Y, and Z coordinate in order to pick up the block. Next, imaging, processing, and feature matching with the Dobot was learned. Turning on the LED light and connecting the camera command to two different match commands and then to a P2P measure block. We were able to recognize two different objects and measure the distance between them. Saving a picture of a circle and a cube, we are able to load these two separate files into two different match commands. The P2P measure command was used to measure the different distances between two objects after they were moved to different locations. During this lab, we were also learned how to calibrate the Dobot. Calibration was done using a calibration board and the solution with a flow of a camera connected to the calibration board and to a two endpoint calibration command. The X and Y locations of the pen connection of the Dobot going to the corners of the calibration board was inputted in the two endpoint command. After the points were inputted, a calibration file is then created and saved. Lastly, in Lab 2, our group learned how to color extract from an object placed below a camera. The flowchart of the solution was a camera, color extract, image, blob, and then calibration. Our group picked the extracted color to be red by noting down the red, green, and blue ranges when our mouse hovered over the red cubes. These values were then entered in the color extraction command block. We then programmed our Dobot to pick up the red blocks by turning on its suction and then moving them to a desired location.
During Lab 3, our team was tasked with completing a robot handshake, as well as using our previous calibration skills and image recognition to complete a rectangle template match. To begin this lab, the Dobots had to be wired correctly in order to interact with each other. The sending Dobot completes its operation, then sends a signal to the other. The second Dobot will then receive this electronic signal and then complete its operation. The connector between the two robots was a breadboard with a handshake module constructed on it. Our team had the receiving Dobot. Our team took two female-ended wires that were connected to the breadboard and attached them to the GND and ADC pinouts of the GP5 port on the Dobot's arm. Once the other team wired their Dobot, they were ready to communicate. The handshake consisted of the first Dobot moving a colored block from one position to the other using a suction cup, then sending a signal to the other Dobot, which would then move to the same position and pick up the block, then move it to another spot and place it down. The positions were all pre-prescribed in the code and shared between teams in order to ensure that the block was delivered and received in the exact same spot each time the code was run. The next part of this lab was using image recognition to complete a rectangular matching puzzle. The Dobot was calibrated first using the same previous method. Then we took and saved an image that showed the rectangles in their puzzle slots. At least one of the rectangles were placed in the proper rotation in order to allow the image recognition to understand the correct alignment of the puzzle. The flow to complete this was camera, fast match, shell module, calibration transformation, move point, suction cup, and then move point. This flow identified the location and orientation of a rectangular piece, then moved the arm to that piece, picked it up with the suction cup, then raised it up. The same flow was then repeated to identify the slot in the puzzle and move the piece to that position and place it down. The angle of the rectangle necessary to fit in the puzzle was coded in C# inside of the shell module block. This angle, as well as the X and Y coordinates from the calibration transformation, were used in the move point commands to tell the Dobot exactly where to move to pick up the pieces and place them down correctly.
Our final project consists of mating two Dobots together to solve a small wooden puzzle. The first Dobot is presented with a variety of colored letter blocks and must pick out only the pieces of a specific color. The pieces are then moved within reach of a second Dobot, which must place them into corresponding slots on a wooden template. Both Dobots make use of a camera to analyze colors and shapes. The first Dobot must identify the coordinates of the center of the correct color pieces and pick them up using a suctioning device. It then moves the pieces to a predefined location within reach of the second Dobot. The second Dobot then identifies the shapes of the puzzle pieces within its reach, as well as the shapes of the puzzle base. Once the pieces have been identified, it locates the coordinates of their centers and one by one picks them up, rotates them into the correct orientation, and places them into their corresponding slots.